Welcome to another episode of the PGTK podcast, an interview podcast. My name is Emmanuel, and first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for listening this week, because now we've hit 10 episodes on this little podcast journey that we're going in. And for those who are listening, thank you. For all the guests who took part on each episode of this podcast, I wanted to say my deepest gratitude as well. And what better guest to have on this 10th episode special than to have the lovely Denise Salcedo on this episode. She's covered everything wrestling-wise from AEW to WWE. You can catch her on Saturdays on Busted Open Radio at Sirius XM Channel 156, and you can search for her own podcast, and it will be discussed during the end of this episode. Like this podcast, follow this podcast, leave a 5-star review, but most importantly, let's share this episode to 2 people so that they can enjoy this episode along with us. And without further ado, here is our conversation with Denise Salcedo. And with PGTK today, we hit double digits, and what a nice and better guest to have than the lovely Denise Salcedo. She's very big in the podcast game, the interview game, the YouTube game. We'll throw in TV. Why not? So how are you?
I'm doing good, Emmanuel. It's nice to meet you, and I'm excited to be on. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, awesome. So Elimination Chamber has come and gone, and it's been 2 days. And what's interesting about the Elimination Chamber is we're seeing a lot of stars that are coming up that have more prominence than they have from their previous matches. And one person that kind of came into mind was Tiffany Stratton. What were your thoughts on her performance on the Women's Chamber?
I really think that Elimination Chamber was possibly the very best night for Tiffany Stratton. She had, I think, what a lot of people want, in the sense that it's the night that makes them into a big star. You came out of that and everybody was talking about Tiffany Stratton. Now, keep in mind, you also had this main event match, which was Rhea Ripley and Nia Jax, and it was a great little match that they had too as a main event. It was perfectly fine. And then you also had the men's Elimination Chamber that saw Drew McIntyre win. There was a lot of good stuff there. But people were talking about the Women's Elimination Chamber, and more specifically Tiffany Stratton. And I think that she really was the MVP of that matchup. And then on top of that, like, the reaction from the Australian crowd when she was eliminated basically told everybody everything they needed to know. And that is that we want more of Tiffany Stratton.
Yes. What's interesting too, it's kind of hilarious when Liv eliminated Stratton, and I heard the BS chants, and you kind of know that after that moment, Tiffany was already over at that moment. And seeing that entire match was kind of interesting too, is the fact that she had the poise to be under pressure, and in every spot that she's done, especially that crossbody off the chamber, that one was very surprising.
It definitely was. And when she did the freaking swanton or senton off of the pod, like, that was really cool too. She just had so many major moments. Like, she really was like the main course of the Women's Elimination Chamber.
Yeah, and what's nice too is, and I was listening to Busted this morning, and Bully and I were in the same page. It was a Muda move, and I'll have to find the clip where he did the same exact swanton, and that was the same exact. It was like deja vu, and seeing how Tiffany had that to handle that pressure and doing everything that she has, that was very, very surprising. And now we're seeing the prominence that she's striving for, and she's doing her best. Now, hopefully, will it be a WrestleMania moment? Who knows? So, like, and what's interesting about that too, not only with Tiffany. It was an Aussie homecoming. You brought up Rhea Ripley. We brought up Indy Hartwell. We brought up, we'll throw in Grayson Waller, because it's such a homecoming for all of the talent who is from Oceania, which includes Australia, New Zealand, all of that. It's kind of interesting seeing this talent being such a full circle moment for those wrestlers to be there, especially Rhea Ripley, who's been in the game for so long, and seeing the match with Nia Jax and how she progressed. Like, what were you feeling, especially with Rhea with the main event?
I think that when Rhea Ripley came out, it was so nice to see her get that welcome. I thought that the coolest thing about this was that this wasn't just like a homecoming for her, right? She was the star of this pay-per-view in the sense that everything was built around her. She was the one on the marquee. She was the one on the poster. She was the one in the main events. Like all of the commercials leading up to Elimination Chamber, they were all about Rhea Ripley. And then to kind of like see her come out, have her moment, have her people cheer for her, and then she goes in and she has this match and she gets her big win, and afterwards she celebrates with her family. All of that was so freaking cool. Like getting to see her with her mom and her sister and all those people. It was just nice because you knew that she had worked up to that point and she became a big enough star so that she earned a night like that.
And especially with someone like Nia, who's already, and yes, she is called the Irresistible Force. Like that's kind of a given how Rhea's journey has come with the main event. And it's kind of interesting seeing her doing the Riptide the first time. It's like, oh, okay, it's going to be exciting. But when that following one where that led to the win, it's kind of such a payoff to not only her, but hearing the crowd. And I myself, I was through the moon. And it's like seeing Rhea retain that and facing Becky down in WrestleMania, and how much of a payoff that is for Rhea. And now we're seeing all these storylines with WrestleMania, and now we're seeing, especially with not only Rhea, but now we're seeing Drew McIntyre in the picture. And I really wanted CM Punk to be in the chamber, but sadly, injuries did take a lot out of him. And seeing Drew just being where he is now in the men's chamber, what would make him go over?
So for Drew McIntyre, like I feel like, of course, for the entire pay-per-view, I think that it was for the most part pretty predictable. Like you knew who was going to win and who was going to win what. I know there was a couple of people that wanted Randy Orton to win, but I think it was obvious the writing on the wall was definitely Drew McIntyre. The story was just there. And I think he's been doing such a tremendous job, like obviously with his heel character that he's doing right now. But on top of that, he's also just like grabbed the spotlight that could have gone to people like CM Punk. And like you said, unfortunately, CM Punk got injured and he's out the door. But before he got injured, Drew McIntyre was still kind of moving that spotlight, going like, look at me, because it's not just about CM Punk. Like, look at what I'm doing too. And so I thought that he really did a great job with that. So with Drew McIntyre, like it really feels like there's been this like rejuvenation in his career. And that's not to say that things were dying down, but Drew McIntyre at one point was just Drew McIntyre. Like in the last couple of years, I don't think we were really like seeing the Drew McIntyre that I think he can be. And he found something new and he's running with it, honestly. And it's great. Like him mocking and trolling CM Punk has literally become like my favorite thing ever.
It's like I keep seeing Twitter and it's on the For You, and like half of it is just Drew just throwing shade at either the eyes. It's so crazy. literally like him, the memes that he comes up for, the fact that we now have the meme where he says, I prayed for times like this, and now people use it for everything. It's great. It's great. Yeah, and it's kind of nice, especially with Drew. Like he's honestly come a long way, and having that WrestleMania moment and seeing where he is now, it's kind of refreshing seeing someone who's been through that game for such a long time, and now Drew is ready to face Seth down the line. And I'm curious, especially WrestleMania 40, with both the men's and the women's side, and with the Elimination Chamber being behind us, what are some storylines that are possible for both men's or women's? I can give you like maybe two, because I know we're pressed for time.
Oh no, that's okay. So you're saying like storylines that haven't been come up, like that haven't happened yet in terms of like potential matches they're going to announce?
Correct.
I think that those are the ones that are obviously the main ones that are hitting on those ones. But the one that I'm also really interested in is Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch. Like them two. I mean, you have it right there. It's the mommy versus the man. And it doesn't get better than that. We're talking about marquee names and things like that. Like the selling of that is just so simple to sell. And I'm so excited for that match because these are two women that have had great WrestleMania matches. Last year, the best WrestleMania match for the women and possibly overall for the night was definitely Charlotte Flair and Rhea Ripley. WrestleMania 38, for me, it was definitely Bianca Belair and Becky Lynch. And now you get Becky Lynch and Rhea Ripley together finally in this WrestleMania match. Like, that is money right there.
Right. And especially with and honestly, like there was a lot, and my lizard brain went to Nia versus Becky because of the because of their storyline. But like seeing Rhea and Becky, I didn't mind it. And at the same time, we're seeing, yes, the mommy versus the man storyline, and we're seeing that a lot with this WrestleMania. For me at least, in terms of the storylines, I'm eyeing Logan Paul and Randy Orton.
Yeah, that one should be good. I really think that Randy Orton will be the perfect opponent for Logan Paul, because Logan Paul gets things down. He just needs someone in there to help him show that magic. And I think that Randy Orton's the perfect opponent for Logan Paul.
And especially what he's done so far. And he's on the chase to becoming, I forgot the name of the number that he has, and chasing the number of times he's had as a world champion. Like having him and having Logan Paul, who is, geez, it's raw talent at this point with Logan Paul, and seeing the run in at the Elimination Chamber on the men's side, it's like, holy crap. I think this is going to be a potential storyline with that on WrestleMania. So it's kind of nice seeing that. Another one I brought up, and my brain went that way, is AJ Styles and LA Knight. That one is going to be interesting because now we're seeing two different styles of wrestlers. We see the enforcer in LA Knight, and we get to see the high flyer and the striker with AJ Styles. So I would love to see that sometime down the line too. So
I'm pretty sure that that's what they have slated for WrestleMania, at least based on the storytelling. It seems like it, and these guys were already, extra beefing with each other, I guess, prior to Royal Rumble heading into their match. It felt like the tension was definitely more so on them than it was on like AJ and Randy or LA Knight and Randy. There was a lot of animosity there between LA Knight and AJ Styles.
Especially back in February. That's what set everything apart. And with LA Knight being on, I think it wasn't on a February 4th Raw or something. I have to remember the taping, but like seeing LA Knight and AJ Styles start that rivalry, that set me over the moon. But when it happened at Elimination Chamber, that was probably the payoff after weeks of like all of the run-ins and storytelling within that match. So I'm glad that we're seeing that Randy Orton and Logan Paul is going to be a thing, and now we're seeing these main storylines too. And I do want to bring this up too. Like, what were some unsung heroes that really need more recognition in the Elimination Chamber?
And I would say for the women, first of all, I want to shout out Raquel, because she went out there after she had that skin flare up, and she had to go out there and perform without makeup, which, to be honest, like as a girl, that is so scary to do, because like it's not like you're like, oh, I'm ferocious without makeup, but it's like when you're on television, it can be so uncomfortable, and especially when your skin is acting up. So I just want to applaud Raquel for going out there and still wrestling this match with the condition that she was under. So to me, she's an unsung hero in the Women's Elimination Chamber. So she's probably the person that I want to name. And I also want to shout out Liv Morgan, because Liv Morgan went out there and she had a hell of a showing too in the Women's Chamber. I thought she did really freaking great. So I would also like to shout out Liv Morgan.
Mine on the women's side is, I'm going to go with Naomi. Naomi has been, and especially when she left for TNA for WWE, and seeing how she's done in the Rumble and seeing how she's really come far. And I think TNA may have had a factor in her becoming a better performer and a wrestler, and seeing her, granted, she got eliminated by Tiffany Stratton, which is kind of like, okay, that's a given at that point. But at the same time, like, we got to see how well she did in terms of how she did in the chamber. So hopefully we'll see more of her. And on the men's, and I'll pass this on to you with the men, one thing I wanted to bring up too is New Catch Republic. I did not know them, and that's the nice thing about wrestlers who I know little of, and seeing Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate, and I had to check videos beforehand. I didn't even know the joint manipulation that Pete Dunne has. It's amazing. It's kind of nice seeing that team up against Finn Balor and Damian Priest in the Judgment Day. You get to see how they can do well in terms of that match. And even SmackDown yesterday on the Go Home show, and seeing where they faced with Dirty Dom and JD McDonough, and seeing how they perform really well with how they're doing on the ring. So it's nice to see New Catch Republic. Hopefully we'll see more of them real soon. And of course, they're in the SmackDown roster, so I really hope to see them. And it took them 8 years from NXT UK to be where they're at today. So it's a long overdue match for them to face in the chamber. So you have the floor on the men's side too.
Yeah, they did phenomenal. And, I've been such a big fan of both of these guys. So I was very happy that they were able to be paired off as a tag team on the main roster.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, especially, I mean, we'll see how they bring up too. And I gotta shout out Grayson Waller with the Waller effect, and especially what he's done with Cody and Seth and the entire buildup, especially what happened last night when Roman kind of interfered. No, he did interfere. He kind of intervened with the Waller effect, and seeing where he's come through and how much of what he's done with the with the Waller effect over in Chamber, and that was a fun show.
It definitely was. It definitely was a fun show.
We'll do a little bit of our show promotion. We'll talk about the main storylines with the matches. But of course, we're not going to go for the hidden ones. With the women's side, who do you got, Mommy or the Man?
Rhea Ripley, for sure. She's the one to defeat Becky Lynch at WrestleMania. I think it'll be really good. And you can't slow down any of the momentum that she's on right now.
And of course, we're gonna have Seth and Drew, and that this will be a very contentious match. I know there's going to be a lot of lead up, and tonight at the time of this recording, we're going to have Raw after Chamber. Who do you got?
Drew McIntyre all the way. I think it's time to crown a brand new World Heavyweight Champion, and he's the one. There's interest. It's Drew all the way.
Now, the big one, of course. Will Cody finish the story, or will Roman chase history?
I don't know. I've gone back and forth on that one where I thought that they were going to have Cody finish the story. Then I'm like, no, they're going to have Roman Reigns continue to make history. So I'll be honest with you, I still go back and forth on it. My answer as of this podcast right now is Cody Rhodes for the win. But to be honest, it's not my official prediction right now because I just don't know. I feel like I've honestly gone back and forth with this one. Like almost every week I have a different answer. It kind of just depends.
I gotta admit to Dave, I am a Cody crybaby. I would love to finish the story. I have my blanket somewhere here. I would love to see Cody finish the story again. I've had this episode before with somebody, and my rationale is just that the years that Cody has went through since going to WWE and throwing it into the waste, and it's like, it's nothing. But again, one thing that I'm going to observe is whether Roman will chase history. That was the main thing. And right now it's February. If he does chase history with beating Hulk's streak, that's probably the factor. But for me, at least, like, I would love to see how Cody finally, and all it takes is just one. That's it. One win, and that's it. And what happens after, let the writers take let the writers take
yes.
At that point.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious too, and we're going to switch gears in a bit, and we're going to talk about your own career and what made you go into wrestling media in the first place.
So it's funny because I think, first of all, I've been a fan my entire life, but I originally thought that I was going to go down a certain direction, and I did go down that direction, which was entertainment reporting for several years, and things really did change during the pandemic in 2020. And that is when I decided to pursue wrestling full time. And it kind of just like fell on my lap. And I just kept going. And I put into pro wrestling what I learned through entertainment reporting. So I think I brought something different to the table that nobody else did, primarily because nobody else had my background, which is entertainment reporting. So I brought that world and mixed it into pro wrestling. And I really feel like that's what really helped me. And so I feel like it wasn't this decision of like, choosing to do wrestling media. It was just something that I enjoyed doing and just kept doing more of and more until eventually it became like my full-time job.
It's like a segue at that point, and especially and you've conducted so much with interviews and over the past few years. Like, what makes such a very effective interview in your eyes?
The number one thing when it comes to interviews is just listening. It seems like the dumbest idea or like the dumbest concept, or like it's not really all that. Like, you're probably expecting some crazy technique, but it really is just listening, because there's times when you're preparing for an interview and you have your questions, right? You have your topics and your ideas that you want to hit on. However, there are times where your guest, the person that you're interviewing, can say something that you were not expecting. And let's say in your mind, you're like, for example, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to ask Denise what her favorite pizza is. And after that, I'm going to ask her, where her favorite restaurant is, right? And let's say while I was answering your first question, I dropped something like, oh, yeah, so I went to go get a pizza while after I cashed in my lottery check, and then I did this and I did that, right? And if you weren't paying attention, you missed the part where the person says, oh, wait, she won the lottery? What? So it's like, but if you're constantly thinking, oh, I'm going to ask her what's next, you're going to constantly be thinking of your question, then you're going to miss something like that. And then you could have been like, oh, wow, what's your favorite restaurant? And then all of a sudden, the listeners are going to be like, wait, did he not ask her about what she said about the lottery? Like it's stupid stuff like that. But it's pretty much just like constantly paying attention or else you might miss something.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been doing that too. One thing, active listening is such an important thing I've learned I've already done like 10 episodes. And active listening is such an important thing because otherwise you would miss something. You're right. If it's like, we're going to talk about the Elimination Chamber. Like, what did he just eat yesterday? Like, it's like, it's one of those like side ties. Like, what is this? And it's interesting with interviews that you've done. What was the one that kind of surprised you the most?
There's so many because I could be surprised, for example, with a person's personality, where I'm expecting a certain personality and then I get a totally different personality. I think that within itself can sort of be surprising. Then there's also those people that you think, oh, they're going to be so larger than life. And then you interview them and they're not. And you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And then there's other people where you're like, oh, this person's probably going to be super quiet or whatever. And then you interview them and they got like the biggest personality. And you're like, oh my God, where were you hiding all of that? So I feel like so many interviews surprise me in that sense where like, I don't know what to expect. But in terms of an interview that really surprised me, so a while back when they had the SmackDown Fox premiere on the blue carpet in Los Angeles, I covered that event. And one of the interviews that I did was with Bobby Lashley and Lana, because if you remember at that time, that's when they were doing that whole love story, right? So I did an interview with them, and it was like 2 questions because red carpet stuff is very, very quick. You get like 2-3 questions max, right? So I upload this video, and lo and behold, it became my first video ever to surpass 1 million views.
Wow.
And I was there like, oh my God, like I interviewed Sting, I interviewed Goldberg, I interviewed AJ Styles, Mick Foley, all of these big important people, but yet the video that got the most views was Bobby Lashley and Lana. And it really surprised me. It was pleasant because I hit my first 1 million viewed video,
wow.
But I just wasn't expecting that one to be the one. And I was like, okay, great, but what the hell? That's so random.
It's like, thanks, I guess. Oh,
yeah,
my goodness.
I mean, to this day, that video is just like, the comment section is a mess. If you ever want to just go entertain yourself, that's the video to scroll through the comment section. I didn't delete anything. I let people go in there. And after a while, I was like, I'm never going in that comment section again. And I have not gone into that comment section again, ever, ever.
I'm surprised that that's a comment that's I'll take a look at that after this recording. But
right, I think don't look, it's a mess.
Is it Reddit? If it's Reddit, I'll allow it. So, but otherwise, we're close to wrapping up, and I always end our conversations with this. And the World Health Organization listed adolescents between 10 and 19. Around that age range, those age ranges, people will grow up and pick things along the way. Now, if you're in the same room as young Denise at age 17, what would you give her as advice, or what would you like to talk about?
I would say, Denise, start your YouTube channel now. Now. What are you waiting for, girl? Start right now. That's exactly what I would tell myself. I would be like shaking myself. Start now. What are you doing?
And you should give her a blue Yeti. Here you go. Hand it off.
That's exactly what I would do.
So, but otherwise, thank you so much, Denise, for having you on this week. And first of all, before I end, I want to give a round of applause to Andre, the producing giant, who facilitated this. So, huge thanks for him to put you on this episode. But otherwise, you have the floor. Oh, and by the way, your brisket will be here in a few weeks, Andre, so just give it some time. But otherwise, the floor is yours. Where can we find you? And take it away.
Also, yeah, shout out to Andre. He's great. I really love working with him every week. He's very cool. And youtube.com/Denise Salcedo. That's the place to be. And social media, everything at _Denise Salcedo.
And that was our conversation with Denise Salcedo. And after hearing our conversation on this recording, and words can't describe how much of a learning experience to have someone who's done the podcast / interview / content creation game longer than I have. And the imparting wisdom that she's given me after the recording ended, I do hope that each episode after this will have better polish than where it was. And I don't want to leave this podcast less than what I already have created. And I really do wish that future episodes, I want to give this polish to really give each episode the best treatment it will have moving forward. And I do want to bring up also to Andre, the producing giant, who's helped a lot to bring Denise on this episode. And you can catch him producing each and every day on Busted Open Radio at Sirius XM Channel 156. And of course, you can follow them on all the socials, on Instagram, on X, and all of these social platforms, and really giving out the best wrestling content every single day. And on next week's episode, we are also bringing in someone from Reality of Wrestling. What I can give you is that they are not wrestlers on this episode, so you'll have to figure out what this episode is next week. And you can follow this podcast on all our socials on X, Instagram, Threads, as well as Spotify at PGTK Pod. Leave a 5-star review, but most importantly, send this episode over to 2 people so that they can enjoy this episode along with us. Send us an email at pgtkpod@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or if you'd like to be a guest on this podcast. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Be awesome with each other. And I'll see you guys on the next episode of the PGTK Podcast, an interview podcast.